G'day guys, it is the coach, and we are here talking Idoneth Deepkin. I forgot for a second, and that is a play on words because the Idoneth Deepkin come to my free cities, they take my souls, and then us humans forget about whatever happened, and we go on our merry little ways, doing what we do in the free cities. But I hope you're all doing well. I am here with Hayden Ford, maybe Hayden Ford #1, a little inside joke for Hayden and I. Hayden is an accomplished Idoneth Deepkin player. He came 14th at CanCon, which is the world's largest Age of Sigmar event. And Hayden and I were talking just before we started, and it was almost like this epiphany that this book is 2 to 3 years old. It's a long time since this book came out, and we were talking about how much has really changed. And Hayden's coming from us from the Model Citizens. I always called you the Mortal Citizens, but Model Citizens straight out of Melbourne. I should just let you talk, man. Welcome to the channel. Welcome to your debut. What else do people need to know about you, Hayden?
Not too much. Besides, I am the real Hayden, the one and only. I'm from the Model Citizen crew, so big shout out to Mr. Smorgan and my overlord, William Knights. That's about. I've been playing Age of Sigmar since probably the drop of Soul Wars. I've always been like a bit of a power player, so this is kind of why I guess I've been drawn to IDK. And ever since then, I've just been developing after, more and more competitive lists.
No, it's great to have you here, and shout out to all of the Model Citizens. Should just call Model Citizens. I see Sam Morgan is in the chat as well, so he's called you Alpha Hayden because you are Hayden #1. The inside joke here, guys, is that there are two Hayden Fords in Australia who play Idoneth Deepkin. Talk about confusing for someone like me who's trying to set up an interview. But we are here to talk about Idoneth Deepkin. Hayden has been very kind to share with me not only his CanCon list, the one that came 14th, but also some variants. Given that CanCon was in January, the meta has definitely shifted. We've had Wrath of the Everchosen, we've had Seraphon, we've had Zench, we've had so many things drop in the last couple of months just before COVID kind of hit. So it was good to get a variance to go, well, what would a Deepkin look like in the future? And I can see some people are asking about how many eels are in the list. Some people are very excited about 27 eels. I don't know if that's actually in your list, but that will be a treat that you'll give us very soon. So good timing. Good timing.
I think people are on the right track with many eels. I think I'm not sure, but I think there might be a few.
And look, I'd be interested as well to get your view on, do you see a world where, Deepkin players aren't so heavily invested in eels, whether it's, the defensive or the combative type eels? And, with such a great range and such the General's Handbook coming soon, we can only assume 2020 is coming not far away, whether it's points adjustments, scenario changes, will other parts of the book be unlocked? So this should be a good chat. I'm looking forward to this, Hayden.
Definitely, me too. I'm very pumped, ready to rock. So
what got you into it? What got you into Age of Sigmar? First off,
I've always been a big fan. Like, I'm gonna get shamed for this, but when I was younger, used to watch mini war gaming. So I've always been a big fan of fantasy battle reports. And then a good friend of mine, Arthur, came back from the UK, brought Death. I basically said, this is what I want to do now. Let's actually get into the game. So I picked up a Order Draconis army just before Soul Wars. I always had, a fascination for, fast cavalry armies. So this is probably where I am today. But again, being a power gamer, my taste for competitiveness slowly grew. So, and then eventually, based on my local scene, there wasn't many players around doing Idoneth Deepkin, so I thought this would be a great opportunity to play something a little bit different than your usual Stormcast or your usual Orcs or Chaos, I suppose, as well. Yeah.
No, that's great. And the chat is giving you plenty of shade. They're saying, from a list variety point of view, they're like, isn't it just heroes and eels? So maybe you're going to prove us right or maybe you're going to prove us wrong. But I'd like to think...
and eels.
All right. Well, I'd like to think there is a world where I can't wait for the day that Reavers hit the table, and they're actually quite decent. I remember when the book very first dropped, they're like, oh man, Reavers going to hide under turtles. They're going to do all these shenanigans. I don't think I've ever seen Reavers on the table, or maybe once.
I think you saw some variations of them, to get when Slaanesh first dropped, you had that 4-drop running around with the Thralls and the Reavers in that battalion, just to try and out drop Slaanesh when they were obviously a big issue. So obviously the battalion of that was pretty handy. But other than that, yeah, they haven't been that big of a showcase
yet.
Just more trying to get drops down.
Yeah. One day there will be a time where the Eidolon is going to drop on the table, and we're going to have turtles, and we're going to have all the good stuff.
Hopefully there'll be a day where there'll be lots of sharks, alapexes. I think like they're the way of the future. Hopefully after the GHB, many sharks. Ben Spinetti.
I was going to say, shout out to Ben Spinetti, the shark man himself. I have been on the back end of Ben Spinetti's Sharks, and he when we played about 4 months ago, he had a Charybdis as well. So he's always down for those quirky kind of lists.
Definitely. I don't think that it's even that, like, it's not really like a quirky list. It is quite powerful when you sit down, you look at it and how IDK actually play. You look at that third turn, you don't need to make a charge. It's just these alapexes are always at -2 Ren 3 damage. It can be quite terrifying, I reckon, on a turn 3 with like 4 alapexes in your face.
And when they sniff blood as well. I remember when I played I remember when Ben Spinetti had I had like a big block of 30 Phoenix Guard, and he just hit me with 4 sharks. I think he hit me with a hero as well. And I think of the 30 Phoenix Guard, I think it was down to about 10 after 1 round of combat. So they do pack a punch. But I think we're like ruining Christmas here, right? We're like unraveling and we're talking about sharks and we're talking about eels before we even got to the army. So we know you're a model citizen, you're out of Melbourne, you've been playing Idoneth for a while, you've done very well at them competitively, although you don't think you've hit your peak yet, you're still learning. The guys like Nick Cohen and Sam Morgan are still taking you to school. But what are the strengths of this army? Imagine I walked into Games Workshop for the first time and I'm like, man, I love these beautiful models. What's the deal with them? What are the strengths?
Yeah, what are the strengths? So I kind of broke it down into 3 kind of categories. So obviously, number 1 would be they participate in the activation war. So the fact that they fight at the start of combat, so that activation war shenanigans. The fact that they're very strong versus shooting. So as we're developing more of a shooting meta, they just get stronger and stronger naturally because of their allegiance, which I guess we'll cover later. And a final thing, which I think is the most underrated one, is just the fact that they have the ability to take dice out of a dice game. So that reliability, that those bonuses to charge, for example, which is probably what we'll dive into a little bit later. But the fact that you can say, I'm going to achieve this no matter what happens because I have that many bonuses, makes them very strong. Because the one thing, I guess, going into the game is like, what if I roll bad? What happens if this happens? This, I don't have to worry. I know it's going to happen. And that reliability allows me to set up plays to always go through with a plan at the end of the day.
And I think that's, for me, that's always been one of the biggest strengths of the Deepkin, is that there is a lot of reliability. When you want to teleport some eels on the side of the board and you want to kind of strike me from a vulnerable weak point, there is so many ways to almost basically guarantee it. It's like failing it is like 0.1% because there are so many ways you can guarantee some things. So consistency and reliability is absolutely key. And the models are brilliant. I think, for me, the Idoneth Deepkin range is just one of the best.
I think they have a very lovely model, but they got to fix those stands. Like, I got rid of my stands as soon as I got them. They're absolutely atrocious. But besides that, beautiful range. Love it. And especially, it's just like...
What have you done to replace your stands?
I just went local hobby store, got like just the dead straight stands, and then just drilled into the bottom, and then just like built up rocks and reefs around it just to make it look like they're in water. But it's just 10 times better than having the old curvy stands that broke 2 seconds in to you own in the model.
All right, well, I'm building KO engine riggers right now who have got that little bendy stand, so I'll keep an eye on that.
You are surely you'll figure out later on, that they just break so easily and they're impossible to repair.
All right, well, hot tip for anyone who's starting Idoneth Deepkin, although I have seen plenty of people using like Azurite Ruins, looking at other ways to kind of build up, to kind of reduce that weird bend. But you're getting a lot of love in the chat, by the way. You're the People's Champion. Oh,
People's Champion, perfect. Whew.
So they're a great range. You've got a lot of guarantees. They've got high movement. They are traditionally a low model count. While you can put thralls and reavers on the board, traditionally it's quite a low model count. Maybe not as much as like an army full of stone hordes or gargants, but in the scale of things, it's not like a big horde army.
I think that's the other thing that's great about it. It's the fact that the sea in real life is full of all kinds of color patterns and all this, and the fact that you got such a low model count allows you to take that time to say this group of eel, I'm going to separate them by doing this, or I'm going to take this set of eels and do this to them. It gives you that, I guess, that hobby ability to express a little bit more than just I'm going to paint 60 grots, and do them all that one batch color and get it over and done with. There's a little bit more fun involved.
60, or like 160.
Oh yeah.
I don't have any shooting ones, but yeah, 160
or 180 skinks, whatever it used back in the day.
No sympathy from me if you're taking 180 skinks, but you did allude to the allegiance abilities, and you kind of give us a high level, strengths of the army, but I'd love your interpretation of the allegiance ability. So if I go allegiance, Idoneth Deepkin over, Grand Alliance Order, I'm going to get a whole bunch of stuff. Probably maybe not as rich or as not as many rules as maybe some of the other books, but certainly some interesting mechanics and probably ones that are maybe a bit simpler to use, but harder to execute because there's so much precision and so much amazing goodness in here. So I'm going to read out some of the abilities, and I'd love for your perception of what does it mean to me as an Idoneth Deepkin player, especially one who's super experienced like you are. Does that sound good?
Sounds excellent. Hit me up.
All right. So the good news is that unlike most other allegiances, you've only got a couple. The first one here is going to be Forgotten Nightmare. So basically, missile weapons can only be used to target an Idoneth Deepkin unit with this battle trait if it is the closest visible enemy unit. So basically, the opponent can only shoot you if it is the closest model to them.
100%. Yeah.
Seems simple, but yeah. How does it work on the table?
So it's always on a model by model basis. So what that means is that you have to measure. You have to shoot the closest model on a model by model basis. So if you have like 30 handgunners and they're like 5 inches from this unit, 5 inches from that unit, you got to obviously measure half and half. But you don't get the luxury of sniping my heroes. You don't get the luxury of sniping, my elite units if I have them covered by screens. But it also extends out to your allies as well, because the rule specifically says the closest, if they're the closest model. But if you have an ally in front, from what I believe, they have to still shoot that model because that Idoneth Deepkin is not the closest visible model. So even cheap, Aether Wings can be a great screen to, again, save all your elite units and all that. But it just means at the end, really, that I can screen my heroes effectively, and I don't have to worry about them being sniped off the board.
Interesting. And it gives you some good, some very interesting mechanics as well, because the missile weapons can only be used to target an Idoneth Deepkin unit if it is visible. So if it's the closest visible. So if you are hiding behind a piece of terrain, it's not the most visible. So I imagine I can shoot something else. But
so behind it, exactly. But it does there are some artifacts that, help with the Forgotten Nightmare as well, that, you can use what's called the Cloud of Midnight, which makes you untargetable, but you are still visible. So it just means you can nullify a whole round of shooting if that hero is in a key point or a specific area. So it's a very, very powerful artifact. Probably one of the most powerful ones, I think, going around. The fact that, comboed with that allegiance, that you can just say, you don't get to shoot for a whole round now.
Yeah, that's great. And especially you made a really good comment right at the start of the show, is that about the last 12 to 18 months, shooting hasn't really been a thing. And probably, I think, over the last couple of months, especially with the introduction of things like Cities of Sigmar, who are bringing Drake, Sisters of the Thorn, Handgunners, Crossbowmen, you're starting to see more and more shooting. You've got Skinks now coming on the table. You've got your Pink Horrors coming on the table. So we're moving into potentially a shooting meta, or a lot more armies are taking shooting as an option. So the Forgotten Nightmare is going to be great to be able to basically protect those juicy things, whether it's going to be a big hero or a small hero, whether it's something you're trying to protect so that I can get close in range to actually get into combat. You can use some nice little screens and use some nice little, shenanigans on the table to protect those juicy models.
Exactly. Yeah, it is a very. I think this is one of the reasons why Idoneth Deepkin have survived, 3 years without a book, still being at the top. Is these allegiance abilities are, always relevant in the meta. Doesn't matter if it's combat, doesn't matter if it's shooting. Like, they always somehow come into play to be quite strong.
Before I move on, any recommendations on things that you like to use or you try to, protect with a screen? Like, what are some of the really good things? You mentioned Aether Wings as an example. Is there anything else that you think about could be a nice little screen?
The Michelin Guard, so the Michelin Guard are a an Achillean unit. They have the shields, not the spears, or the swords, I should say. They're 4 up unrendable, but obviously in turn 1, depending on which tide you're on, which is the cover tide, they're 3 up unrendable. So they're basically, I would say, against most shooting, unkillable. It's like 3 models, 12 wounds. You can't kill me, but you have to kill them, and it's the most efficient, into some degrees, the most efficient 140 points you'll spend in the army if you don't, extend out to allies, etc.
Yeah, that's great. The second part, and this is probably where it gets a little bit more complicated. I love this table, and I love the fact that you can manipulate this table a little bit. So the second piece we're going to talk about here is the Tides of Death. So basically, the Idoneth Deepkin unit with this battle trait will have different Tides of Death ability for each battle round. So basically, battle round 1, there's X. Battle round 2, there's X. And you can see there's a table here. You can see a whole bunch of stuff like low tide, flood tide, high tide, ebb tide, and then you repeat the Tides of Death. So there's going to be things such as in the battle round, all units with the Tide of Death battle trait are treated as being in cover. You are going to get things such as you're able to run and still shoot or charge. There's going to be some things like basically you fight before anyone else resolves their fighting, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole bunch of cool stuff. So first things first, talk to me about this table.
I think this table is, it's the big thing about Idoneth Deepkin. So obviously your first tide is your low tide, which just means your whole benefit gains the benefit of cover, which again ties back to what I just mentioned before about your Michelin guard. So all of a sudden they've gone from a 4 up down to a 3 up, or your heroes have gone, for example, Volturnus or the Achillean King have gone from a 3 up down to a 2 up. So getting that benefit of cover the whole round, whether it's in your opponent's turn or whether it's in your turn, you've got the benefit of cover, which just makes your first turn a very strong turn to be quite aggressive, because you have that safety net that I will have as long as I don't charge. I will have that cover, as in that cover bonus. So it just means that you're essentially neutering -1 Ren, or you're not going to take as much damage from shooting because you're just reducing the amount of Ren people are suffering, and therefore it just over the amount of a game it really starts to add up, because you've not got a lot of models in your army, so you got to make every unit count.
And these rules don't stack, do they? So it's not like when it gets to round 2, I'm going to get round 1 and round 2 benefits. It's almost like round 1's done, so I now look at round 2's rules, etc., etc.
Yeah, exactly. So each round has its own rule. So round 2, you get to run and charge, and this is like kind of like your prep round for the big round, which is like kind of like what everyone refers to as your win condition. So I guess we'll go to round 3 first, which is when you get to fight first or at the start of combat before anybody else resolves their combat, which just means that all my units get to whack you before you get to whack me. And being on round 2, I get to run and charge. It allows me to set that up for that round 3, so I can get where I want to be, or I can get to the heroes if they're going to buff me, because I have the ability to run and charge, or I can quickly kill a unit that's potentially going to tie me up in combat for round 3, and then I'm ready for round 3, because in a lot of games that will be your win condition. Is all right, I'm fighting first, let's go.
Is that also a trap? Is that also like, as an opponent, right? I look at this table and I go, "Ooh, he's clearly trying to set up for a round 3, always fight first for his entire army." So he's basically trying to set up, that basically that combat. Is that also a trap to fall into? Like, do you find that you try to set yourself up for a charge in turn 1 or turn 2? Or are you always going for that turn 3 charge to take advantage of the high tide?
No, definitely a big trap. So I think one thing as an IDK player, you really got to understand your battle, like the missions, how you score, when you score, how many points you score per turn, because sometimes you simply can't wait for turn 3. Like Blood and Glory, the game's over on turn 3 in some cases, so you have to be aggressive early. Places of Arcane Power, you can be over on turn 3 again, so it's a big trap to fall into, because you're not going to guarantee that roll off to win turn 3. So sometimes it's you got to think about your mission, think about what you need to achieve before that turn 3, and if you can achieve it. So knowing your missions is probably the biggest thing as an IDK. Knowing how many points can I score between turn 4 and 5, and will I win?
Yeah, I imagine that, if I pick this book up for the first time, I'm thinking to myself, I'm building around a turn 3 strategy of the high tide, and everything I'm going to try to do is try to set myself up so I get into combat in turn 3. And, very much you can almost be like very tunnel vision and not take advantage of the scenario, not take advantage of, really setting ourselves up for success. So basically that's what I wanted to call out, was that turn 3 isn't always the time you want to charge. Don't fall into that trap.
Never fall into that trap. It's probably the easiest trap to fall into. And at the same time, I think when you play like an eel list, for example, falling into that turn 1 alpha is a big trap as well, because being patient can be very hard, and also obviously waiting too long can be also bad as well. So you just got to pick what your army is, pick your battles wisely, and that's all comes again down to your missions.
Yeah, this army is definitely attacking your opponent with a surgical knife that's got a very sharp blade. So again, it's not like an Iron Jaws army that's going to run up and try to smash you in the face with a sledgehammer. You've really got to pick your battles. And I have seen people who have been probably too aggressive, and it's really backfired, especially if they've been double turned. So do choose your battle wisely. Don't fall into the trap of just solely focusing on your tie to death.
100%. And even in some games, you got to, I guess, realize that even if you do get to fight first on turn 3, do you have the damage? Like, I know people talk about IDK having a lot of damage when we talk about all the buffs and all that, but sometimes it may not be possible. Like, I think my first game of CanCon, I came to the consensus that I wasn't going to kill 15 Chaos Knights, 3-up, re-rolling, set all their saves and all that. Like, doesn't matter how many bonuses to attacks I had, I was going to kill myself first before they killed me. So realizing that you're not going to win every fight as well is important. So you got to go at a different way.
Yeah, good shout. Is this order of sequence, right? Low tide, flood tide, high tide. Is this always the sequence that you're going to follow? Like turn 1 is always the low tide.
Yeah, it's not always. So depending on the heroes that you take again, so you can what's called flip the tide, which just means that instead of starting from round 1, it's essentially you're starting from round 4, and then you're going down to round 3, down to round 2, down to round 1. And there are other ways again to like change, for example, that you may not benefit from round 1 at all. Round 1 may just be round 2. So you just go round 2, round 3, round 4, round 2, round 3, round 4, or something along those lines. So there are ways to change how the tides work, and there are ways to flip that tide as well.
Yeah, I wanted to call that out. So there is a way to reverse this tide. So if you are trying to get, a very aggressive combat eel list, people do like to flip the tide, so you can kind of go for that alpha strike on that very much turn 2 charge by flipping the tide. But again, the point I wanted to call out here is you can manipulate the order of sequence here. You don't always have to set up for this turn 3 charge with high tide.
No. And I think that's one thing that separates, even though you see a whole bunch of eel players, they're not always the same. Like you'll see that one player will be like, oh, I'm waiting for turn 3. And then you go the next game thinking, oh, he's waiting for turn 3. And all of a sudden it's turn 2. Oh, what? He's fighting first. Like not every list will be the same. That's something to watch out for, is look for those key heroes. Are they the general? Are they allowing him to flip the ties or, change it up a little bit?
So if you are listening to this and you're not a Deepkin player, that might be something you want to ask your opponent is, can you flip the tide? Is this order of sequence always going to be true? Because that will be the difference between maybe giving away second turn or the way you might play the game. Other than anything else you want to add to the Tide of Death, or do you want to talk a little bit about the enclaves?
I think there's one other little smaller part of the allegiance ability. It's like the Isharan rituals, is it? But I think it might be further down.
Might not be on this page. This is not. I've just taken some photos of my. I've just taken some photos of my battle tome. It's not actually.
Well, really quickly, I'm pretty sure I think they're mentioned in the allegiance part, but the Isharan rituals are just the 3 pairs that IDK get available. I think it's one of the most underrated parts of IDK, and in some games can be super powerful. So it's like making a casting roll. It's a 2d6 roll. It goes off with a 10. You can get bonuses to it. So if you have a if your hero is a priest, he gets +1. If he's within range of a gloom tide, he gets +1 again. You can get +1 for other heroes being nearby, and again priests again. But their effects are the big ones that you want to take away. Is the fact that I can take away your army.
There's the one that I hate the most. It always kind of like ruins my Christmas. Is the Ritual of the Tempest, which is until the next hero phase, enemy models can't fly. It makes me cry so much. Yeah. Makes my little Terrorgeist walk along the table, or my dragon. It's just so shameful. And it makes me cry. And there's nothing I can do about it. I can't unbind it because it's a bloody prayer.
Yeah, and especially like when you go, right, those eels are coming for me. I've set up my nice screen. My Terrorgeist is behind those units. And all of a sudden you realize, oh, my Terrorgeist can't jump my screen anymore because he doesn't fly. And I've got this big, nice long line of ghouls. And all of a sudden the eels can still jump you. Very powerful. And then again, that just allows you to stall a turn because you say, all right, that's 1 turn wasted. Turn 3 is around the corner.
Yeah, no, great shout out. So not only do you have a spell lore, not only do you have artifacts, you've got this thing called an enclave as well. So much like most, if not all, of the battle tomes, there are these sub allegiances, so ways to customize your force even more. And the one that you've chosen, the list that we're going to explore, is in fact Domhain. So I thought I'd get you to explain a little bit about why you choose Domhain over the other enclaves. What does it bring to the table? And for anyone who's watching us here live, you can see the rules on the table or clearly see it in your battle tome.
Yeah, so I guess a lot of the units do have some inbuilt reroll ability, but generally there are no rerolls to wounds unless you take like an Eidolon of the Storm. But regardless, there's very limited rerolls for wounds. And I guess as the meta was evolving a little while ago, you were having things like a whole bunch of Keeper of Secrets pop up, the Gash pop up, Big War was popping up with their Maw Crushers, Terrorgeists. Like basically, it was a bit of a monster meta was coming around a little bit, or these key units were monsters. And what Duhan allows you to do is to reroll all your fail wounds against monsters, which, you know, when you're punching with like, I don't know, a million attacks, the ability to reroll your wounds is quite powerful, considering that there aren't many debuffs for wounds out there except for maybe Legions of Nagash and one or two spells here and there. So the ability just to, again, secure all those wounds, because that's how you're going to do your damage, just makes it very powerful. And the fact that, again, if you charge, you get to reroll your ones, so you don't have to rely on Volturnus to get your reroll ones, which just makes it a lot more powerful. And they're the two key things to take away from it. It's not really the battalion. It's not that exciting. Doesn't really do too much because you have to bring a turtle, which doesn't really work too well. That's all right. But it's the ability to, reroll ones to hit when you charge, and the ability to reroll your wounds against monsters, especially to take out, like, I don't know, a rogue idol is huge, especially with just 3 eels.
Yeah, it's a good little ability, what Domhain gives you. If you weren't going to choose Domhain, and one thing we're going to do next up is going to go through some of your lists, but before we get to that point, if you weren't going to choose Domhain, are there any other ones that you would say that are maybe next in line for you?
I think it's, I don't know if I can ever pronounce it, like Thuhan. Yep, which is the one that allows your mounts to reroll wounds of 1. And again, the ability to reroll wounds is fantastic because you get the natural reroll ones to hit from Volturnus or your Achillean King. But it also allows you to, again, change the tide, which we talked about before, which transforms your retreat and charge, or your run or your cover, can't quite remember, into run and charge, which just means if you flip the tide, you're running and charging turn 1, and then you're fighting first. So it's just,
which is crazy cool, right? Like if you think about your army, right? Because you basically got this high movement that you can really take advantage of the board. You can put some stuff on the side of the board as well and come in when you need them to come out. But then also you're going to be able to flip the tide and essentially come in and wreck face in turn 2. So
100%. It is terrifying just realizing that, like trying to think, I'll just backboard, but then you realize those eels are moving 20 and still charging, going, where do I hide? Where do I go?
And it's really crazy. I know I've had a lot of success against Idoneth Deepkin of late with my grots. And one of the reasons with my grots I've had a lot of success is that I've got 100 to 140 goblins, cheap bodies on the board. But that's unusual. Outside of the likes of grots and Skaven, even things like Cities of Sigmar aren't going for like, a heavy free guild guard or, flagellants on the table. Most people are going for elite things like Phoenix Guard. A lot of armies are going into those multi-wound, larger bases. So the challenge is screening off all of the board, trying to protect some of these juicy stuff. It's very difficult. It's very difficult for opponents. So I think taking advantage of that with your high movement, being able to run and charge, being able to then fight first, is a scary prospect.
Very, very terrifying. And I think that's one of the reasons that leads to so much success in the IDK army is that, again, reliability it always comes down to say that I will get to where I want to get to every turn. Wherever you hide, I'll get there.
And shout out as well, Adam Huey has mentioned a good comment as well. I have seen a couple of Deepkin players bringing in our good friend Gotrek into a Deepkin list, and that is a friggin' scary prospect too.
100%. The only problem I always see with the Gotrek is that you can't take Volturnus because it's a command trait. The Iron Rack Enclave, which just means obviously Volturnus being a named hero means he doesn't get command traits. So you'd have to take an Achillean King. It's not that bad, but the fact that Gotrek gets to run and charge, fight first is obviously a terrifying thought. and nothing's going to survive that. So 100% agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. It's 500 odd points, but it does show you some versatility around.
Well spent.
Yeah, it's 500 points well spent. It's almost like, do I ignore Gotrek and go for your eels? Do I go for the eel? So do I ignore the eels and go for Gotrek? It's a very difficult task to handle. But again, it's just like one of many builds, right?
100%, yeah.
And that's the cool thing is, whether you go eels, if you're like Ben Spinetti, who you would recognize from the faction focus, Idoneth Deepkin, a lover of sharks, also very successful with sharks. Just because we're talking about eels doesn't mean that the sharks and the turtles aren't as good or don't have a place in the army.
I think sharks and eels are very close when you look at it. It's just what slightly edges ahead is probably the eels, and that's why they get more play. That doesn't mean that, a couple of points here, a couple of points here in the General's Handbook 2020, you might see sharks just creep ahead, and then there's a big shift in the meta that all of a sudden, there's a whole bunch of shark boys out there rather than eel boys.
Well, in the last General's Handbook, we did see a points reduction on sharks, and we did see a points increase in eels. So it did make it a little bit more viable to take the Alapexes, but again, who knows what's coming in the future? Maybe sharks is the new meta, as Ben Spinetti would say.
He will say that, definitely.
He was already in the chat before this video started asking about shark meta, and he wanted to know if he had a jingle. He had this weird jingle about Ben and Ken, the Fishman. He literally sang it. So if you go watch that Faction Focus if you want to hear Ben Spinetti sing the song. But this is not the Ben Spinetti show. This is the Hayden Ford show. And
I do like the sound of the Ben Spinetti show, though. It sounds very nice. It's got a good ring to it.
It was good. It was good. Maybe we'll combine forces one day and we'll have the Ben and Hayden show. But on the screen here, we do have one of your lists. This is the list that did come 14th at CanCon, so only a few months ago. So this is quite fresh. And I'm going to go through a little bit about the list and try to get an understanding of why you do what you do. And then let's look at some of the variants as well, given that we do have new armies in the meta. We've got things like the Lumineth coming, Gargant's coming. We've got Seraphon kind of dominating on Tabletop Simulator. So, how would these lists kind of evolve over the last couple of months? So to kick us off, we are Idoneth Deepkin, we are Dom Hain. You've got three leaders here. One is Volturnus. Why Volturnus? This is a great question because a lot of people ask about the King versus Volturnus. So why Volturnus? What does he bring to the table that the Alarian King doesn't? Pretty sure I mispronounced his name, but I don't care. I forgot already. Volturnus, talk to me. Why him? Right, so why the general?
So Volturnus and the Achillean King all link back to the tides, so your allegiance ability. So he has the ability on the high tide, which is round 3, the fight first before anybody else, to give 3 units an additional 1 attack for a command point. And you can obviously spend multiple command points, so it's not just only 3 units. You can spend 4 command points and give each time 3 units an additional attack, and that's to all melee weapons on their profile. So it's not just one weapon; they've got essentially 3 weapons: bites, tails, and their spears, or swords if you take an Michelin, but each one of those gets an additional attack. And what Volturnus really allows your army to do is allows it to turn 3 eels. It allows them to be like force multipliers. So 3 eels after 2 command points turn into 6 eels. After, say, 4 command points, 3 eels turn into 9 eels, or 6 turn into 18. So it's this little very, very powerful force multiplier that turns this little tiny footprint of like 3 models into essentially having 9 eels on the board, which is obviously a much bigger footprint. So they all get into combat, they all get to attack, they all get to the max benefit of what 9 eels would do, but with very little cost in return. And that's why Volturnus is very strong. But obviously another thing is that Volturnus has a 3+ immunity to magic. So as OBR or Nagash has become to the front, or as Seraphon and Zencha all coming up to a meta where magic is very heavy, having that 3+ compared to no 3+ is extremely powerful as well. It just means that you're more likely to see Volturnus get to round 3 than an Achillean King.
So 2 questions I've got here. One's coming from the chat. I'll ask my question first because I'm the host. Flip the leader. So when would you take the Achillean King instead of Volturnus?
I think, That's a good question. I think I probably would never take the Achillean King over Volturnus. Maybe if I needed to get some form of artifact on the king and I wanted to just use him as bait with the Midnight Orb. So, send him up the board, bait him in, then activate the orb so they waste a turn trying to kill the king. But I probably, if I were not to take Volturnus, I'd probably take the Tidecaster instead. So I have the ability to flip the tide, which is what we talked about before. Just because, again, fighting on turn 2, I think would be much more powerful than having an extra attack here and there on turn 3. Because, you're just, again, activating your win condition one turn earlier rather than, I guess, a turn later.
And the reason I ask is that I have seen a lot of discussion. A few people have asked me as well, what would they take, Volturnus or the Achillean King? And obviously there's like a 20 points difference, and one's a bit more customizable with a command trait and an artifact. Yeah. And obviously one comes in with its own benefits. I think it's almost like season to choice, but you're saying Volturnus is your preferred over the generic king.
Yeah, but that's not to say that you couldn't take Volturnus and the Achillean King. I talked to Sam Smorgan about this a lot, Mr. Smorgan, about bringing both. Yeah, never heard of him. It's just some guy in Melbourne. Just he's got some broken what is it, Night Azir, who just never dies. I've sent 9 eels into a Night Azir, didn't kill it. That's with the mortal winds and everything. It was a horrible day. But he talked about bringing in Volturnus and the Achillean King, so that again you have that safety net, because the Achillean King does hit pretty hard with a good artifact here and there. It's not like he's a wet noodle. He does hit hard. He has the ability to buff units, so if Volturnus does die, at least you're still getting some benefit out of the turn 3 command point, and he does still give the same similar buffs that Volturnus gives to your units, so the extra bravery, the reroll 1s to hit in the combat. So it's just like obviously a lesser version, but you could bring both, and that just means you're securing the likability of having on turn 3, those extra attacks again. But obviously it has to be the general, so you couldn't, which is a downside. But I guess maybe, if you wanted to bring Volturnus, you could, if the opponent doesn't know that, it's a little bit here and there.
Yeah. The other question I've got before we talk about the Soul Scryer is coming from the chat, and they've asked, in what phase do you activate the command ability for Volturnus or the King? And I'm looking at the wording. It is a little bit vague here. It doesn't actually say in your hero phase.
It is in your hero phase. So the start of your hero phase, or in your hero phase, I should say. So at the start of turn 3 is when you activate it. So in your hero phase, your turn 3 is when you use it. So if you lose the roll-off, you have to wait till your turn, essentially, the bottom of N3, or turn 3, then you can use it. But it does hang around to your next hero phase. So, for example, you still get to keep that benefit if you lose the turn 4 roll-off and they decide to go first. So again, you still have all those extra attacks in turn 4 or until your next hero phase.
Yeah, I can see the wording does say at the end, the benefits basically last until your next hero phase, but it's not very clear at the start to say when you activate the command ability. So
I think in like the general rules, if it doesn't specifically say, I think it's meant to be done in your hero phase. So but that's how I've always played it. It's in the hero phase, your hero phase of turn 3.
One final question that's just come up from Michael Clarke, who initially said he wanted to troll you. The second part is probably a good question, and that's around redundancy. And is there value of redundancy by having both the Volturnus and a King, or do you think, like, for the average player, you just choose one?
I think it again comes down to missions. So if you're playing places of arcane power where you need a hero, then the redundancy is less. But again, if there's no hero pack, I probably wouldn't take an Achillean King. It's just the opportunity to have that hero piece on the board for if you really need to save a unit from running, or that 12-inch bubble to reroll 1s. It's the Achillean King is about effective as 3 eels in turn 3. So he hits just as hard. He always has the -2 rend, but obviously, the more and more force multipliers with the CP come out, then obviously those 3 eels just pull ahead. So again, only if it was like a hero pack mission, I would take an Achillean King, or potentially, I suppose.
Yeah, and Smorgan's also pulled out that the Achillean King has Rend 2, which Volturnus only has Rend 1. So that might be another good shout. That's another good shout out, that you want a bit more high Rend, especially if you're dealing with things like Mortec Guard or Phoenix Guard or things with higher armor saves. A Rend 2 might be nice to have.
100%, and the fact that it's a flat 3 damage when he charges compared to Volturnus always being D3.
Yeah, plus you obviously got artifacts you can put on them and things like that.
Yeah.
You know, probably again, this is probably worth calling out here, guys, is that Hayden's list isn't the only list. This is not a silver bullet that's going to make you the world's best player. This is just one variance and kind of putting the methodology of the strengths into a list. And that's why I asked the question, you know, what the difference was between Volturnus versus a generic king, you know, and I'm going to ask a bit more about, you know, the combination of the eels and different things like that. So take this with a grain of salt. Find the list that you really enjoy. If you really love Alapexes or Reavers, do what you love to do. But ultimately, you know, we're just kind of showing you the way we put this together in a very competitive sense.
Exactly.
Next two heroes you've got is, I guess, again, you've got two soul scryers. So I guess the question is, one, why do you have two? Why haven't you got something different? Why the Cloud of Midnight? And when they're on the table, do you have a strategy on how you use a Cloud of Midnight versus the one without Cloud of Midnight?
Yeah, I definitely have a strategy. So I guess I took two really because, again, when I looked at the CanCon pack, we had Places of Arcane Power. So obviously you want Volturnus to be alive on turn 3. That's kind of like the key piece in your army. So if you're not on an objective and Volturnus is trying to be all nice and safe, you're not scoring points, you're going to lose the game. So you need an extra hero here and there. I chose to take another additional Soul Scryer because I liked the rules that came with it, which was the null deployment. So the Soul Scryer is able to go off the board into reserves and take 2 units with it. And I think that's very powerful in the fact that it's information. It's to say, I have 3 nothing drops. What are you dropping? Tell me what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, I get to watch it unfold. So, and that's like, so times 2, that means that's 6 drops before I have to tell you my plan. And by usually most cases, most armies nowadays are around about 8 drops maximum. That's without, you know, without making the benefit of their battalions. That means I've got 2 drops I have to do and run that quite easily.
Yeah, no, it's a good call. And you do see variants of lists like this. You'll take the Tidecaster, but that's going to force you to be the general to flip the tide. But yeah. I like the reason why you've got two Soul Scryers. And the Cloud of Midnight is just an awesome artifact. It's hard to not take it. It's hard not to take that.
Definitely. I think like the Cloud of Midnight.
And that's obviously coming.
Go for it.
Go on. No, please.
I was just going to say, so the Cloud of Midnight, you know, on a Soul Scryer, because the Soul Scryers benefit from their own buff, which is the +3 charge. And being able to, like, you know, you send in all your eels and then a Soul Scryer follows in behind, it's just a hero. No one really cares about that 5-wound hero. But the fact that he has made a charge means he's eligible for a 3-inch pile-in. So 9 times out of 10 of my games, I would pile one of my eels into range of another unit. Let's just say, I don't know, a huge, a deadly Maw Crusher, for example. That Maw Crusher would pile in, smash up my eels, and then I would just pile in my Soul Scryer just into combat with him. And then all of a sudden now he's in combat with my Soul Scryer. The next round would come around. I'd activate my Midnight Orb. That's 2 rounds that Maw Crusher did nothing. I've essentially kind of shut him down because I've just piled just within range of him. And I think that's, you know, taking the Maw Crusher out of 2 combats is huge. He has to wait an additional time before he can kill it or retreat.
Huge. And there's a lot of cool benefits coming from a Maw Crusher, especially when it starts killing things. So you want to be able to, you know, you want to take that down ASAP. And it's nice that you've got a whole bunch of eels that can kind of shock that Maw Crusher off the board, which leads us to all of the eels. So do the maths here, guys. You've got 2 units of 3 Ishlan Guard. You've got a unit of 6 Morsar Guard. 1, 2, 3, 4 units of 3 Morsar Guard. So is that 27?
I think it's 24 in total. I think it's 18 Morsar and 6 Ishlan.
All right, someone in the chat was saying 27, and it's too late for me to do maths. So rewind it. There's 24 eels in this list. There's also a unit of 10 Shadow Warriors that we'll come to in a minute. But I guess I want to kind of understand a little bit about the methodology. So why do you choose Ishlan over Morsar? Why do you go unit of 3 versus unit of 6? Why don't you go all Morsar or all Ishlan? I guess, you know, like talk to me through the thinking process of the Ishlan versus the Morsar and the unit size of 3 versus 6. They can go higher than 6 as well, right? So like what's all the thinking behind it all? Yeah, I think it's 12. Yeah, I think when it very first came out, I remember something running 12 at me and I cried. But there's a lot of points in one unit, and that can go bad when you tie them up with like some cheap bodies.
Yeah, well, I guess step number one when I think about what my Morsar do is that the force multipliers again. So that means that on that turn three eels turn into six eels turn into 12 or 18, and so I don't need a unit of 12 eels on the board because I don't need 36 eels in a unit because that's just redundancy, like Michael Clarke mentioned before. Like it just becomes ineffective in a way that I've got too much damage on the board. And again, they take up a massive footprint. And Morsar have this ability that when they charge, they get -2 Ren and they get 2 damage. So you don't want them to be in combat. You don't want them to be, chipped. You don't want them to be just pulled into combat because they lose all their benefits and they have to obviously retreat. Especially on turn 3, that's a big disaster for your army because you just lost, your big punch, your big bang, your big, win condition, I suppose. So having these little small units means I can separate them out. They can be all over the board. And you can't tie them all off, but they can obviously get into you and make those charges. So that's obviously why you have all the small units. And that one unit of 6 is just there to secure what it needs to kill. If I need to kill a Terrorgeist, they're going to get the job done. If I need to kill, well, probably not the Gash and OBR, but maybe a Maw Crusher, for example, they're going to get the job done on that Maw Crusher. And that's what they're there to do. It's just to, kill what needs to be killed if on that turn 3. The other units are there just to kind of like nip away at my enemy, from the sides, from the front, just be a nuisance basically, and then obviously prepare myself for turn 3, where I have my big show. And my thought with the Michelin was that I need Volturnus to be alive on turn 3. That's what I'm playing for. That's what I essentially built my army around. So I need to protect him. So having these, unrenderable guards essentially surround him, so he can't be shot because of my Forgotten Nightmare allegiance ability. So they can only shoot them. And he also has obviously the lookout, sir, etc. And obviously they act as a physical screen as well, so they can't obviously charge him. So they're just this little, 140 points times 2 that I don't care if they die as long as Volturnus is alive on turn 3.
Yeah, and look, so basically for a newer player who's looking at this, or maybe they don't quite understand that the eel kind of, I was going to say methodology, it's not even a methodology. You're looking at Echelon Guard, and essentially they are a defensive style unit. And when you're looking at the characteristics, they basically ignore Ren. That's one of the big things that they're going to bring to the table. So they're great to soak up damage, and they're harder to kill. Especially when there's a lot of Ren 1, Ren 2 throwing around, the fact that you can ignore Ren is beautiful. But then you've got your Morsar Guard. Sorry,
it's also the fact that you can throw them into like -3 Rend as well and being like they're going to survive a turn or 2. So again, if you're in combat with my Michelin, you're not in combat with my Morsar, you're not in combat with Volturnus. So again, I'm ticking away those turns for turn 3, and that's what they're there to do. It's just to waste time.
They're a big shield. They're a big shield for things like Volturnus and your Soul Scryers, or even just tying up the again, they've got fast movement, so you can tie up one of your opponent's hard hitting units with something that's just going to take longer to kill because they're not affected by Rend.
Yeah, exactly. And then again, if it takes longer to kill, that's better for me.
Then you got your attacking eels, which is your Morsars, and they obviously do really good stuff. You mentioned the high Rend, the damage output on the charge, but also the thing that people really love is that once per game little zap, where basically that and what I had forgotten about, because it's been a while since I played Deepkin until the other week, I had forgotten that I was thinking that they had to charge me to do the zaps, but no, if I charge them, they can still do the zap, and I'm like, oh crap! And then my Colossal Squig took 9 model wounds from a zap because my Colossal. I'm like, oh, I'm going to counter it. I'm going to charge my Colossal into them, and then I remembered, like, I wish I didn't do that.
And it's all kinds of little things, like the fact that it's done at the start of the combat phase. So a handy thing I did at CanCon was like maybe turn 3, I'd send in my Morsar and I'd use all of my attacks, and if I didn't quite kill it, then I would zap. Because in case I overkilled, you don't always have to use your zap first, because obviously it's the choice, my order of activation in terms of if I fight first then zap. So you can always like kind of save your zaps, or you can it's not always you have to zap every turn that you're in combat. You can hang on to it, you can wait. It's a very, very handy little thing to say. I guess I was playing against Marauders the other day. They get -1 Rend above 20. I just zapped them to 19 and the Rend just went away. But that's that's super handy.
It can be really helpful as well for the order of activation. You can zap, and then once you've neutered it, literally what Hayden just said, you've neutered the Marauders by removing the Rend. You're like, cool, I can kind of leave them a little bit more safe now. I'm going to move to something else. So
exactly, you can choose somewhere else that's more pressing.
Yeah, bring a behemoth. I mean, for a Colossal Squig, for example, my scenario that I played with Rocco the other day, he zapped me for 9 mortal wounds. So all of a sudden, my behemoth profile went to well over half. I'm lucky that Colossal Squig has 16 wounds, but essentially, like the damage output now from an unwounded versus a semi-wounded is quite massive. So that allows you to then go, start the activation in other areas of the battlefield.
Yeah, you get to bring your attention to someone that might be more pressing, and it's a good way to bait your opponent, I suppose, as well, to say, look, my eels are exposed, depending on which unit they're coming up again, and then you charge them, and then they say, and you just tip the scales to say, all right, now you've got no rend, or you've gone down a profile. I'm a lot more comfortable with to go over here instead.
Do you see a world where, or if you were going to tweak this list and maybe someone didn't want to have as many eels on the table, how would you build a list like this without as many eels? Would you go Alapexes? Would you bring a shark in? Would you bring in more characters? Would you put like an Eidolon in? Like how could you build a variant to this?
I think I'd definitely bring in like a very similar to Ben Spinetti's, like the 4 shark list. Like he has 4 sharks in the units. I think it was 2 units of 4 or something like that. I think that would be the alternative I would take to maybe Morsar, like maybe a unit of 6 Morsar, 2 units of 4 of Alapexes. And I might even throw in the, I think in some cases, the Namati Corps battalion, just to reduce my drops or get an extra artifact and command point, because it's not like we don't have anything to use our command points on, because obviously that turn 3 with all those extra attacks, each command point, adds up.
Yeah. You got Shadow Warriors. You got 10. Sorry, before we get into the Shadow Warriors, is there anything else you want to add to the eel discussion? I mean, it's pretty evident why they're in the list. They got high movement. They got lots of wounds. They do a lot of damage, or they can soak up a lot of damage. They can manipulate the board. The fact that they fly means that they're brilliant to jump over screens and kind of get zap or do damage to that juicy center that so many armies are going to have. Anything else you'd add to the eel discussion?
I think the only last little bit is the fact, again, that reliability, to say that they get the free reroll the charge, they have the reroll battle shocks. Again, it's just like, again, more reliability that I don't have to, again, I guess for sharks, for example, I have to allocate a wound to a unit to get that reroll, where eels, I just say, turn 1, I can reroll for free. And I don't have to worry about, again, that command point, or I can save it for, again, that turn 3 or anything else.
Yeah. I find the zap as well as a great deterrent, is that people try to actively avoid the eels. When you have an army list like this, you just can't avoid it and you just have to accept it. But if you were going to reduce your eel count and bring something else to the table, people will likely try to avoid the eels until you're able to get that zap out.
Yeah, I think one thing, it depends on how many eels. Like if it was 9 eels, I'd probably try and stay away. But I think one thing is 6 eels, 3 zaps is on average like 5 or something mortal wounds or something like that. If you can take that hit, you've taken away their charge bonus. And I think that's more scary, to have that -2 rend, that 2 damage. So sometimes it's worth just charging into them and saying, all right, I'm going to lose a whole bunch of models, but later on I've just saved myself 10 models or whatever it may be, because they're not charging me in return.
So basically, you do a mortal wound on a 3+. On a 6+, you do D3 mortal wounds. So
yeah. You could roll hard and get a whole bunch of 6s, or you could roll a whole bunch of 1s and 2s. So it goes either way. And sometimes you just got to think, all right, that charge is a little bit more consistent. That damage is a little bit more consistent. There is more of it.
So you don't have a battalion, so you've bought yourself a command point and got to keep that up your sleeve. I think it's pretty obvious why you've got that, whether it's reroll charges, reroll hits, the whole bunch of rerolls that you want to activate your command ability. But talk to me about the Shadow Warriors. You've got 10 Shadow Warriors are being allied in.
Well, obviously after Cities came out, Shadow Warriors had a bit of a change to them, and they get the null deployment as well. So basically they're off the board, which just means that 6 drops off the board turned into 7 drops off the board, which means my first drop was usually my opponent's last drop again. So it's very frazzling, I feel, when you go to a board, you're putting down all your models and you realize your opponent hasn't done anything. You go, all right, where do I put this? And then all of a sudden you've just made a whole mess of your deployment because you don't know where their key pieces are. You know that they can come off the board. You know they've got these bonuses to charge. And then they have these Shadow Warriors, which can pick off your heroes because they get +1 to hit and win when they're in cover. But they can also steal your objectives as well because they can, deploy anywhere on the field. It's just a very, very, I guess, the null deployment is very powerful. The pick-off ability is very powerful, and the ability just to steal objectives is powerful. So they're just, for what they bring, they're so good.
And the psychology as well is just knowing that at some point between round 1 to round 4, you're going to drop something outside of 9 inches, and you either want to protect an objective, or if someone moves off their objective, you can score it. Or, if someone moves the character away from their unit and, you can ignore Lookout Sir, you might be able to snipe that hero while they're vulnerable, or even just generally harass something while a force is moving this way. You might steal the side this way, and then you're kind of splitting them up on how they use the table, or kind of split their focus. So for 110 points, they're cheapest chips.
Especially the fact that Morsa are coming off the board, like you're just thinking when you're playing that game, all right, where are the eels? They're off the board. All right, all the eels are now on the board. I'm fine. And you tend to forget about those 10 Shadow Warriors, in my back pocket, waiting to come on again between that turn 1 and 4, because you're just so focused on all those eels that are off the board that are going to come on at some time, maybe turn 1, maybe turn 2.
Before I go into your next list, maybe we'll acknowledge that point. So if I was learning about this tactic about taking eels off the side of the board, what is your average combination when you take things off the board? Like, are you taking units of 3? Are you taking that big unit of 6? Like, what's your logic, your thinking process, your average starting point?
Well, with my list, the list I took to CanCon, I always took the units of 3 off first, just knowing that, again, I guess 3 out of my 4 drops off the board will be the units of 3. They have to be. I only have to decide whether or not that 6th unit or the unit of 6 would be my last choice, whether I want it on the board or off the board. And again, it's just to see how the deployment played out. If he left a big open gap for me, for 6 eels to jump in there and do some nasty work, then they would go off the board. If there was they screened the backs too much and they left a big open gap at the front, they'd be on the board. So it's just, again, that luxury of just saying, all right, what's going to, 5 or 6 drops later or 7 drops later, now I have to decide what they're going to do. So it all depends on how my opponent's deployed, whether they've left a big gap for 6 eels or whether or not I have to go another way around it. But generally, I'd be thinking about where could those 6 eels get into.
Hypothetically, if I was to change your list, and let's say you only had 1 Soul Scry, let's say we had a Tidecaster in there.
Yep.
So let's imagine we just had 1 change, which was 1 less Soul Scryer. What would be your ideal combination off the table if you only had 1 Soul Scryer?
1 Soul Scryer, ideal combination. I think it'd be 6 and 3. Like 6 and 3 always. I think the 6 would probably always go off, just
combat?
Because it's such a big, the combat. So the unit of 6 eels, combat eels, Morsa off the board, with the unit of 3 Morsa off the board.
Cool. So you wouldn't take the Michelin off on the side of the board. You're always looking for the combat ones.
Yeah, because obviously we want them to be in combat, and we want my Michelin to defend what's on the board. So if I had like a Tidecaster, that's my general, or again, Volturnus, that's my general, they should be there to protect him. And the reason why I guess I'd never take Volturnus off the board is because I need Volturnus to be within like a certain position so I can activate my buffs in turn 3. So obviously it's at the start of your hero phase. The CP works with units wholly within 18. So Volturnus can't just be, within 6 of the board edge whilst the rest of your army's on the other side. So it's very important that Volturnus needs to be where he needs to be. And that's why he has his 2 floating guards, essentially, of Michelin.
Before I move on, one final question. People are throwing shade at you in the chat, but it's all your homies. The last question I got for you, they were calling you imposter. They're like, "Oh, where's the other Hayden Ford? Where's the other Hayden Gate and things like that?" So nice to see you here, William Knight. Thanks for the shout out and the shade. Is there a situation where you might bring the Michelin guard off the board? Like, do you see that world? Maybe taking them off the board and trying to almost like neuter, a hard hitting opponent who's like a unit that's coming up the board, or is it always just the Morsa?
I think it's always just the Morsa in my head. Like, I don't think there would be a case where I take the Michelin. Like, the idea to neuter a big unit, it just thinks that my Michelin should be able to get there regardless, because they're moving 14 turn 1. Or they're running and charging turn 2, so they always will get where I want it to be. It's usually the fact that they're off the board is for protection rather than for aggression. It's to say, I can't be charged because I'm off the board, but when I'm on the board, I'll guarantee that charge. So again, I get my -2 render my 2 damage.
No, that's fair. And again, I'm just asking the questions that some of the chat might be thinking. They're like, oh, well, maybe I want... Yeah. So I think what I'm hearing is, you really want to build around the Morsa coming off the side of the board. You want to get those zaps in. You want to charge. You want to do that high range. You want to do that high damage. And again, it's not the only way to do it.
where you're versing Nighthaunt, for example, they're unrenderable, so maybe it's worth taking your echelon off the board. Just be like, they've got more attacks, they've got more weight of attacks, so against, unrenderable, maybe it's more worthwhile to take echelon off the board. That would be the one scenario I see, or like an ethereal War Crush or Stonehorn to say, I'll tie you up, I've got weight of attacks, I have no rend anyway, so I don't care about your ethereal. So that could be one possibility. I could see myself saying, yeah, maybe I take echelon off the board for that specific scenario.
Tie them into their deployment zone or tie them into their territory, stop them scoring, especially with something that might have high rend, low volume of attacks. And because you're ignoring the rend, you're just tying them up for 1-2 battle rounds. They're dirt cheap at 140 odd points, and you're stopping them from scoring while you're setting up your Morsar and you're claiming objectives.
Yeah, exactly. I think that could be one possibility, yes.
Cool. I mean, I think the point here is that, there's not one single list. There's not one single way to play. But, based on what we're hearing so far, Morsar is the stronger choice, but not the only choice.
Definitely not the only choice. I think, there's always to play IDK. I think, I guess when you're being nitpicky and trying to take the top list, then you'll probably lean more towards Eels.
Another list you've said. Is there anything else you want to talk about with that particular list, or should we go into your other list and kind of show a different way of doing it? And I can see we still have this big body of Eels, but we've got a bit of a different combination when it comes to the leader choices.
Yeah, there's not much else to talk about except for the fact, again, when you think about your echelon that are off, so your Soul Scryers that are off the board, they do benefit from your allegiance abilities. So that means they do have the Midnight, the Nightmare rule. They do have the Tide rule as well. So that, again, like what I talked about a little bit a while ago with that Midnight Cloud ability, is the fact that you can charge in a Soul Scryer. You can sacrifice it all you want just to say he's going to charge in and he's going to, for example, he may not be in combat, but then you have to shoot him next turn. And I've just lost a 5-wound hero, but he's already done his job. Like, there's always those little things that you can think about with your heroes as well. Is they do benefit from the allegiance and they don't need to stay alive. I think we always think about, I've got to keep my heroes alive, where once my Soul Scryers have done their job, they've done their job. And that's to get going to the charge.
While Michael Clarke has been trolling in the chat, I might actually call out, this is quite a good question, and I'm not sure if you've had the opportunity to play New Seraphon yet, but when I've been seeing them on the tabletop, especially on Tabletop Simulator right now, what we're seeing right now from Seraphon is a very dominated Lord Crowe in a Starborn allegiance, with lots of salamanders doing a lot of shooting and high rend attacks. And Michael's question, which I think is an interesting one, given that when we get back into the tournament scene, Seraphon could be the new meta leader. How do you think IDK's abilities to will work in regards to something like a Seraphon, from a null deployment point of view, being able to kind of jump over screens, being able to your Echelon Guard might be able to soak up some of that salamander damage to get into maybe some of that Lord Crowe a bit easier than some other opponents, given that they can fly and they've got high movement. Have you given any of those thoughts in your current
100%.
list design?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of my armies, like the one I think we're talking about next, I've given some consideration. I think the more troublesome army for IDK would be the Coalesce rather than the Starborn, because obviously they're reducing your damage by 1. So those damage 2 spears turn into 1. Yeah, they're still -2, but it's only 1 damage. I think, the idea behind IDK against Starborn is, I think if I get into a Starborn army, I will just mince it. And I guess the luxury of having the allegiance ability to soak up some of those shooting attacks, because again, yes, they're doing mortals on a 6 salamanders, but the -2 rend isn't that scary. It's less scary.
The Echelon Guard's just laughing at it. They're just like, lol.
Yeah, it's a 3-up, and I've got that command point up my sleeve in my in one of my lists, the first list, so I can make them reroll saves of 1. So it's like if they get a whole bunch, if a big unit goes into it, I'll give them reroll saves of 1 before the start of the shooting phase. So it's I have a much higher chance of surviving. And then if they've wasted their turn, then I'm just going to, again, those eels will come for them the next turn. And that's an opportunity where I guess you'd say that there might be a game where I don't have anything off the board. I just have everything ready to have that counter whack that they're going to hit me with.
Running up those Echelon Guard to take the first shots and then just go an absolute strike with the Morsars. Now that the Echelon's kind of taking the salamander shots.
Exactly, because, they're going to mince those salamanders once they get in there.
So this next list we've got Domhane, we've got the Volturnus. We're not going to talk about Volturnus. We kind of know what that's going to do here. We know the force multiplier when it comes to the Morsar Guard. Got the Soul Scryer, Cloud of Midnight again, taking some eels off the board. Happy days. The big difference I'm seeing here, though, is the Knight Venator. So that's something that we don't see very often. We see things like the Knight of Zeros, we see Knight Heraldors, we see a whole bunch of, the Lord Arcanum or the Knight Incantor. But the Venator, that's the shooting one?
The shooting guy with the bow that never works, exactly.
The Zeros, the alternate Zeros build.
Yeah, exactly. Well, with Seraphon coming into the meta a little bit more, when you look at the Seraphon in isolation, I guess except for Salamanders, skinks aren't that great, by themselves. But when you put a Star Priest behind them with, mortal wounds on 6s, you give a Skink Priest +1 to hit, +1 save, and all of a sudden, these little 5-wound heroes make this unit of skinks into a terrifying unit of, monsters. And if the Venator has the ability to snipe them, I'll shoot your hero. So I'm, hitting on 2s, winning on 3s with the Knight Fated Arrow. It's -1 Ren, but it's 3 damage plus D6 if they're a hero. So if I take off that Star Priest, I just shut down. No, look, those skinks aren't terrifying anymore. They're just regular skinks. And again, or he could potentially snipe a Slan. Like if a Slan's on the board, you roll hot, take that Slan off. And he's also participating in objective games. So for example, Place of Arcane Power, he can sit on the bottom objective, 30-inch range. He's just shooting away. Picking off those heroes was such, decent to hit at, +2. So +3 with Lookout Sir, it's still pretty good, still pretty decent. And it's just the ability to take away that synergy from that army. Because once you pick all the heroes off, I don't think the army's, well, it's still scary again with Salamanders, but I think they're just a single unit that just do a lot of nasty things. But Skinks don't become that scary. Razordons aren't really scary at all. It's just once the synergy falls apart, I think they all fall apart.
Sam said that was Sam Morgan said that was an awful take, so he doesn't rate your take on Salamanders and your Seraphon build. But what does he know? He's not on this show.
He doesn't know anything. No, definitely not.
What about Sam? He's old news. I haven't had him on this show for like a couple of years now. But
yeah, he's been a little while. No, I think the Venator's a really good place, right? No, maybe not the best place. Like, I think there are other units out there, but I like the idea of that I can sit in on an objective, for example, Arcane Power, and I can still participate with that model. I can still score points, because I think the big thing at the end of the day, what we always got to remember with IDK is I've got limited amount of models. I want to be in your army with all my models. I need to still be scoring points. I still need to be protecting for like those, was it blood and gory, knife to the heart turns? I mean, not that one model will save me, but I still need to be, protecting my objectives here and there. And the ability to shoot with 30 inches is still quite beneficial.
Yeah, and there might be alternate builds again. You might want to get some more reliability and get some reroll ones to hit if you need it from another particular build. So you might go the Knight of Zeros. If you're finding, especially like now we've got more Allegiance terrain on the table, you might want to take a little Tootie Matoot, little Knight Heraldor. There's a whole bunch of cool Stormcast allies you could tap into. Although they're not the only allies, right? You've got the Darkling Coven, so you tap into Cities of Sigmar. Absolutely loving the Scourge Runner chariots as well. Which
I think that's what Sam will bring up. He loves the Scourge Runner.
I'm personally in love right now with Order Serpentis, so I've been running like a Dreadlord. I'm loving Drakespawn Knights. Especially in Tempest Eye, but the Dreadlord is I'm absolutely loving it. He's just an absolute beat stick. But you've got a really rich allied pool. You've got Darkling Coven, Daughters of Cain, you've got Eldritch Council, so you can still tap in things like the Lawmaster, RIP Lawmaster. You got Order Serpentis, Scourge. You got the Scourge Privateers. You got Shadowblade, Stormcast. You got Sylvaneth. You got Wanderers. You've got literally like half of Grand Alliance Order as an ally option.
Yeah, I think the only thing we need now is Seraphon, so we can get those extra command points.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. But obviously, again, you've got so much cool things to tap into. We mentioned Ben Smenity before. He's absolutely in love with his Charybdis. The fact that it auto heals is a nice little monster. It kind of works well. But again, you can kind of tap into your ally pools with something different.
Definitely.
A Prime.
A Prime, yeah. I think the one thing as well is that you can take your core, like kind of like eels, and then you can always you'll see all kinds of people venture out to like a Goretrek or a Celestin Prime is a good example. Like I think the good thing about IDK is that you can take, all right, I've got 12 eels that will suffice, and then I can venture out into any of my other alliances that I think might be beneficial.
Well, and the Prime, for example, is another great one for null deployment as well. We kind of come from
exactly.
the guy and hit you with a hammer.
And it drops all the mortals as well. So you've already got mortals coming from your eels, and more mortals from him as well. So yeah, again, ability to pick off those small little heroes is what you want with IDK, especially against Seraphon and maybe even Zench.
Instead of going through the last list that you sent me, I'm going to kind of throw you a curveball that I know you're not prepared for, and I want to talk to you about the things that you haven't talked about, and I want to get your kind of like your elevator pitch or your hot takes right now on where they stand in the current meta. So I guess the first things first is our two Eidolons. So poor old Eidolons, you've got the aspect of the Storm and the aspect of the Sea. They are a big points investment for a hero choice in your army. Where do they currently stand in your list selection, or the importance of putting into a list? Is there a place for them?
I think it's the Eidolon the Storm, or the melee heavy one, is one which I've given some consideration. Like the magic one, I just don't have enough magic cast. When you're in a meta with Nagash at +3 to unbind, and again Croque at +2 board wide, etc. There's not a lot of room for us to have much magic, so I'd probably go for the melee heavy one, just because I already am melee heavy. So, and the ability to reroll once the wounds is quite nice. I just think he's a little bit too expensive, but there is room for him to enter the meta, especially with neck 2 written on some of his weapons, and the ability with, again, those Michelin rituals to have him reroll hits. That's all of a sudden he's looking a lot better. But I guess you'd have to invest heroes again.
And by the way, the other ally we did speak about at the start, but not specifically call out, is Gotrek.
Yeah.
What does Gotrek bring to a Deepkin list?
It brings what doesn't he bring to a Deepkin list? He brings, obviously, I think he benefits from everything that he loses everywhere else. The fact that he can't teleport, that he gets to run and charge, the fact that I guess he gets to fight first and he gets to fight again at the end of the combat phase. So he deletes everything, and whatever piles into him, he deletes it again, and he's taking minimal wounds. He's just, I guess, the thing that can kill what can't be killed, which is like Nagash, for example, or like whatever it may be out there.
Yeah, you got Archeon running around right now as well. So and who knows what Teclis is going to do. If we obviously Tyrion, who knows where Tyrion is? Yeah.
So I think the fact that he can do all those kind of things, and he can retreat and charge, I think that's very good as well. Like that's the one thing I've underappreciated a little bit with Gotrek, is the fact that he comes in, he smashes, then he retreats out and he charges in again and smashes again. Like that would be very powerful, especially if you flip the tides or later on in the game. I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah, that's really good. So there might be a space for the Eidolon of the Storm, Sea, maybe the Magic, and you guys don't really play in the Magic game very much. So I think the rituals come in a lot more. Obviously, you've got some spell casting, but you're not an army that relies on Magic to do your thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's the big thing about our army, is that we don't need Magic to pull what we pull off. We don't need many bonuses except for in combat, and that's why I think staying away from Magic is wiser or smarter, because it's not a great investment. But and all the Magic, when you look at our lore and all that, I think we just naturally get it. Like I think the one that we all take is like that Abyssal Depth, which is the benefit for cover, but you get it in turn 1 anyway, and then after that you're in cover or you're charging, so you're not going to get it regardless. So I think, regardless if you manage to get it off or not, I just don't think there's that much benefit for us in Magic.
What about? Yeah, absolutely. What about your foot troops? Your things like your Reavers and your Thralls. Where do they currently stand?
I don't think they're that bad. I think like Reavers and Thralls. I think Thralls especially, like the fact that they can fight first, the fact that they've got these little like special abilities. If you only have 1 wound, they get an extra attack. If you have more than 4 wounds, I think they get +1 to hit or something, or no, an extra damage, something like that. I think that's not bad at all. And the fact that they get to fight first in turn 3, they definitely have a place in the meta. And I used to play with Thralls. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just, again, I think Eagles just pull that slightly ahead. And if they get a little bit cheaper and in the battalion, all of a sudden IDK can become a low drop and dictating the turn with IDK, I think is very powerful as well. Because I think one of the big things about IDK is that we don't care about the turns too much, because whether we go first or second, if we go second on turn 2, it means we can set up for turn 3. If we go first if we double turn 2, then we have a chance to, hit again. So I think that's one of the luxuries that IDK have, is that we don't mind too much about the turn activation, let alone I guess turn 3 we always want to go first, but at least we have the opportunity to say on turn 1 and 2 you can have the double turn, I'll go second, because we're high drops, usually we go first.
Yeah, But it's and you know, being able to put 3 to 6 units on the side of the board, depending on how many soul scries you've got, certainly means that you don't have to worry about that, whether you're high drop, to dictate the terms of battle. At the same time as you can put all your juicy stuff on the side, so they're not being targeted in turn 1.
Yeah, exactly. And then so you have the luxury of just being like, I don't mind if I go first. I don't mind if I go second. I don't mind if I go first in the second turn. It's just I had that luxury of being comfortable in terms of the order of our turns. It's only turn 3, and even then, if I do it right, going fighting only on the 3rd turn first, that's all I need. Well, fighting on the second half of the turn, yeah.
We've talked about alapexes, and I think the sharks are finding their time in the sun. We are seeing more and more lists taking sharks, and I think obviously there's a little bit of a trade difference, right? Like sharks have 8 wounds.
8 wounds.
I know when I've played Ben Spinetti in the past, who's we keep talking about Ben, 1 because he's a great player, 2 he's a lover of sharks, and I've seen him use them really well in groups of 1. So given that they've got 8 wounds, a battle shock is quite expensive for them. So especially if they do lose more than 1, you really want to use a CP on them. But if you do, you want to keep those 8 wounds. You don't want any of them to run, but it is kind of expensive CP to use. Given that you don't have a lot of CP to begin with, and they can go somewhere else that's going to be better used, like in your eels. But having like those little units of 1 kind of self-contained running around the board, people are focusing on your eels, and these sharks just come in and do absolute damage. So I think there's a place for sharks in the current meta, and I think Ben's kind of proving it. Would you agree with that?
100%. I think the fact that it's these little bits and pieces of damage that up over a game as well. Like again, a 5-wound hero with Seraphon, sharks get to shoot. They have the ability to do like a 3-shot or a 1-shot, doing 3 damage or 1 damage each. 2 turns you could pick off a Star Priest, 2 turns you could pick off a Skink Priest, and they have -2 damage, -2 ren 3 damage on their bites and fins. And you have one of them just running around, or 2 times one of them running around on the board. Yeah, that could definitely mess up a few people's games, because again, like you said, people are just going to be focusing on those eels. Where are the 6 Morsa? Where are those eels? And then there's 2 sharks who's just gone into your back lines, because 9 times out of 10 they'll do maybe one damage with their shooting, so then they get to reroll charges.
Yeah, and I was going to say the sharks get some benefits if they shoot something but they don't kill it. It's like a little sniffing blood or something. There's some type of thematical rule there. So I know Ben, whenever I play Ben, he'll shoot my character and just to do 1 or 2 wound to it. But by getting those 1 or 2 wounds off and not killing like a 1-wound model, he's able to get a whole bunch of benefits for the charge, and then they come in and they're just much more dangerous than shooting like a 1-wound foot troop and not being able to take advantage of that.
Exactly. And it's, again, it talks about what we talked about before with the, maybe turn 1, you're not killing that hero, but then turn 2, you're killing that hero, and you're then ripping apart their, those little 1-wound heroes. So it all adds up with sharks, I reckon. There's just this little, maybe secret tech that haven't quite had their day in the sun yet, but maybe with a nerf to eels or another buff to sharks, I could definitely see them coming to the front, and it'd be great to play them.
The last unit I'm burning to ask about, and I always had visions of buying 4 of these, putting bandanas on them, and calling them my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and that is the Leviatons. I did want to have a narrative list of having 4 Leviatons and having having a Vermin Lord to be my Master Splinter, showing my age here as a 90s kid. But Leviatons, where are they at in the current meta? These big turtles, they have seen a points decrease over the years. Are they in a place now that they might be worth putting into a list? Or why would you bring it, or why wouldn't you bring it?
I don't think they're in a place right now that they can competitively come into the game. That's right now. Maybe that will change in the future. I just think they're too expensive for what they bring. But I have heard rumors, maybe you can confirm this, that it has killed a Maw Crusher in turn 1, or one turn Maw Crusher.
Well, look, I played Rocco the other day, and he did put 15 wounds on a Gordrak. Gordrak. Gordrak and Gotrek, why they got two very similar names, and I always accidentally say the other. He did put 15, but as we were talking about before the show started, that's not something consistent that you can expect that it can put out.
Yeah, no.
It was a lucky roll. So, I guess what I'm trying to say here is don't go get a Leviathan thinking you're going to be able to take down these big wound heroes in one round of combat. It was a lucky roll, but it does have potential. It does have potential, and you can do stuff with it. Just don't go in expecting that all these hot rolls.
I think the Leviathan may see more play if Thralls and Reavers see more play. I think the Leviathan has more synergy into that. I think it's the reason that you don't see much play is because you just see eels instead. All the Leviathans are close.
100%, and that's because if you've because basically your Idoneth Deepkin units are treated as being in cover if they're wholly within 12 inches. So yes, in turn 1, your whole army is going to be in cover anyway. But as you're moving your Thralls up the board or your Reavers up the board, you're going to be able to tap into that. And the reason he was able to do so much damage to my hero is because if you roll a 6+ to hit, it does 6 mortal wounds.
Yeah,
it's 6+. You can bring it down if you've got some ways to add +1 to hit. So it is a 6+.
I think the FAQ is changed to unmodified, but don't take my word for that.
All right, well, check it out, internet. Don't before you do what I just said, go check the FAQs in the errata. As per the wall scroll, 6+, but they may have FAQ'd that.
I think it was at the Christmas, or the Christmas FAQ, the December FAQ. They write it to unmodified hit of 6. But
either way, the jaws, you've got what's it, the crushing jaws. It is one. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So 6 mortal wounds is pretty nice.
It's very nice. That's that brings a little bit of Terrorgeist pain to a player. Rolling those 6s.
but it's only 1 attack as well. So
it is
to get a 6 to hit on that one.
Give him 2. Pardon? Give him 2 attacks. That's how you fix them.
All right. Well, okay. Well, either way, I guess what I'm trying to point here is that it's super lucky to do. It does have the potential. Don't expect it in every game.
I think the one thing also is that cover is a little bit do you kill the Leviathan or do you kill the Thralls that are in cover or the Reavers that are in cover? It's a little bit I think that's where one thing I can start seeing play is it's a little bit like a shield saying, I have to kill the Leviathan first because he's giving these units bonuses. But then all these little units who are doing the damage rather than the Leviathan is obviously they're what's mincing up your army. So it's a little bit what do I go through first? Which again could see some play.
I think the point I'm really trying to make here, and the reason I asked Hayden for his advice, is that with the new General's Handbook coming, new scenarios coming, we don't know what's coming for Deepkin. We don't know what's coming for the scenarios. Right now, I think things like Thralls, Alapexes, aspect of the storm the combat guy.
Domination,
the combat one. The combat one is easier. And Alapexes, they have a place in the book. It's just right now, eels are probably just too good. But if a points adjustment came in, 10 or 20 points kind of variance either way, you might find that the momentum kind of swings. And now there is an incentive to be running a whole bunch of Thralls under the Leviathan or buy a whole bunch of one-man Alapexes or running around with, Lotan or something. We just never know. But right now, that's why the eels have been focused in the meta.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's not like eels are obnoxious. They're not like salamanders, which is just I'm going to bring 14 because they're so good and nothing else is good. They're just better than Alapexes, so therefore we're going to bring them along because they're just competing a little bit more. But again, maybe if Alapexes down 10 points or eels went up 10 points, you probably see a big change in the meta of for IDK.
I think the only thing that I've really struggled with the Thralls is that they're on 32 mil bases with 1 inch attacks. If they either were on 1 inch range. So if they were on 25 mil bases or if they had 2 inch range, I think you'd probably see even more Thralls on the table. But the likelihood of getting those 10 into combat in their current position is hard.
And it's not like their weapons aren't that, far off from looking 2 inches. They're pretty, Paul Armish. So I think it's definitely a good possibility. Should happen.
Yeah. Well, hopefully there is a new rulebook coming out. I mean, you are one of the oldest battle tomes now. Use Stormcast, Legions of Nagash, Daughters of Cain. There's only a couple of you left now, pre-Soul Wars. So
I'm hoping will be the last book to be changed because I don't think we're in that much of a bad place. I think it's just maybe a few points changes here then it fixes us up. But I think there's other armies that need love first.
Yeah, I would like to see the day that Deepkin really does explore the book. I think we're getting closer to that day. But most armies that I've played that have been Idoneth Deepkin, much like yourself, and you have been successful, is with very heavy eels. So whether you go build eels, whether you go and explore other parts of the book, right now eels are just the strong part. And let's acknowledge the pink elephant in the room. They're just good. Why would you take something suboptimal unless you really loved sharks, turtles, thralls aspects?
Yeah, exactly. I think the other thing also is that if you want to play on the top tables, you're going to bring eels. But if you bring alapaxes, you're not going to do bad. It's not like you're not going to have very bad luck. You're going to do very well. It's just maybe you're not going to take the whole tournament away because you didn't bring eels. But so I would still say go for alapaxes, like if you want to, because there may be a chance in the near distant future, end of June, that they might be better, and you just made a really good investment.
Yeah. A couple of rapid fire questions to bring us home, I guess. In the average game, yes, scenarios change. Yes, opponents change. All things change. On average, how does an Idoneth Deepkin army win?
So I guess two ways is to make sure number one is you don't overcommit. So if you tie yourself up in combat, you're gonna obviously find that you lose your punch, and then the enemy will punch back or your opponent will punch back harder. So you want to pick your battles wisely. So small units here and there, or at least try and hit from the sides so that you're having the smallest footprints possible. And the other way is to wait for that turn 3. But obviously, again, if you're not going to win on turn 3 because you've not got enough damage, then you just want to again punch from the sides, have a small footprint, and then just kind of try and grind it away as much as you can with again, you've got like MSU eels running around, so minimal units, and you're just trying to say, I'll sacrifice this unit this turn, I'll sacrifice this unit next turn, and you're just trying to rack up points. But so it's either small footprint, hit from the sides, or turn 3, go hard.
I always see Deepkin armies, like when you're building around and you're playing them, you're really trying to dominate the board through high movement, manipulating the sides of the board and kind of dictating the terms of battle. So, being able to have the high movement to be able to reposition your army, or to take things off the side of the board and choose where you want to attack and try to find that weak spot and wait for that weak spot to open. Or what you see is people are so scared of the 3 units or 6 units coming from the side of the board, they don't fully commit to the board. Or maybe they bubble wrap and make sure that they castle up so that you can't hit their juicy stuff, which means that their army is quite compressed and they're not taking up the whole part of the board. Or they're deploying much closer back so that you don't have to worry about deep striking at the back, which means that, again, the dudes that are on the board are able to kind of take up more board space and not have to worry about combat as early. So there's a lot of manipulation.
The fact that if they're casting up, they're not on objectives. You're sitting on objectives, so you're going to be winning the game without even having your combat, because you're kind of like a finesse army. You don't have a lot of wounds. You don't have a lot of I guess you can't really take a hit too well. You can take somewhat of a hit with the Michelin, but if they're casting up because they're terrified of your sideboard alphas or where you manipulate the board, then again the turns are just going to rack up, and again you're going to come closer to that turn 3 again, which kind of secures your victory if they castle up too much.
Yeah. No, it's good, and I think that's where kind of you guys really own the board. And I think they're always attacking first in the high tide, whether it's turn 2 or turn 3, depending if you flip it or not. It is really powerful, and I think in the current meta with shooting, being able to mess up people's shooting. I know there's been a couple of times where I've played a Deepkin and I've wanted to shoot the character, but I'm just not allowed to. So I've chosen things that I want to be able to shoot. I've got like a 30-inch shot, or something that's going to do a whole bunch of cool stuff, but I'm forced to shoot the eels, the thralls, as you said, maybe it's the Aether Wing, something that's 50 points, right? And it's just taking some wounds that your eels aren't going to soak up.
20 Iron Drakes into 50 points of Aether Wings. That feels bad. It's the power. It's the power to always be relevant. I feel with that allegiance is that if the shooting gets stronger, we get stronger. If combat gets heavier, we get stronger on turn 3. Like it's how it doesn't matter how the meta evolves. We always seem to evolve with it with those allegiance, which is what always I think has kept us a S tier kind of army for those 3 years. Is that it's not so much about war scroll creep in terms of like, having hitting on twos, winning on twos. It's about our allegiance allow us to, I guess, adapt.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys have been quite flexible. You guys have been competitive since the book is released. You and Daughters of Cain have really held their own. Things like Nurgle, things like Legions of Nagash, they have not held their own. And that's why, Nurgle needed the Wrath of the Everchosen. Legions of Nagash is basically like dead. Like people aren't really doing very well competitively with it. But yeah, you guys have held your own, and I think it kind of shows the flexibility in this book, and it was a well-written book.
I definitely think it was a definitely well-written book, and it's hopefully that's why when they do if they do a new book, they keep it well-written, because I guess my biggest fear is that we get the Sylvaneth treatment.
Which, by the way, is an allied choice, and we won't talk about that.
What's your ally in?
We won't talk about the battalion of Wooden Sea, which
we just don't talk about Sylvaneth anymore. That was one of the reasons why I actually picked up IDK. I had a Sylvaneth army, and then the book dropped, and it was time to move on.
By the way, shout out, next week I'm doing a show about Sylvaneth with one of the best Sylvaneth players in the UK. So I'm sure that'll be interesting. Maybe I'll ask that question of where they stand, and maybe there's something we can bring from that. But it isn't hard.
I look forward to it.
It is a hard ally choice when you think about how rich your allies are. Final question to kind of bring it all home. What are the things that you have learned by playing this army that may not be as obvious to a new player picking up this book for the first time? Like, what's all the stuff that you've kind of learned from the experience and the play style, or even something that when you put it on the table, the mechanics is far greater or, more complicated? Like, what have you learned?
Yeah, I think it's making use of your allegiance abilities big time. So I think it's very easy just to think, I'm fighting first, I'm in cover, I'm running and charging, but it's all your models or all your units get those allegiance. So, down from your tie caster, down to your soul scryer, down to even Volturnus, you can sacrifice, with your allegiance for shooting. You can tie units up with your allegiance for by fighting first, or you just have so much flexibility that every game you have a way of winning where, sometimes you may feel like you don't. It's an ever adapting. I feel like IDK are ever adapting. So it doesn't matter what kind of game. Again, like I've had a game where I just realized I'm not going to win. I'm just going to grind it out. And I learned that on the day. It was just, you're always, I guess, you come into Sungaze thinking, I can't win this, I don't have the power. But IDK, I always feel like there is a way, as long as you look at, you understand your allegiance, as long as you look at your army hard enough, you can always pull out that victory. And I think that's why, IDK have always been quite prevalent as well.
Yeah, you've got the high movement, you've got the ability to, dance around the table. I've just been thinking to myself the last couple of minutes, one of the builds in Cities of Sigmar is people taking the Soul Scream Bridge and, teleporting Iron Drakes or crossbowmen or handgunners or Sisters of the Thorn, the Watch, the ones who are on foot. But the point, Sisters of the Thorn are the ones on the deers. The foot. But they take that big block of 30, teleport them up the board, and then shoot. And I'm just thinking about how annoying that would be if I built my strategy around that and I come up against a Deepkin player and I'm not able to drop 60 shots with Ren 1, Ren 2 that have been super buffed up into that juicy target because I'm forced to shoot at whatever's at the front.
Whatever. And it's same with I guess Vanguard Raptors, you're trying to get the alpha with your drop off the board, and then all you realize is, all right, I've got, for all my points in these Raptors, and all I can do is shoot these Michelin guard, and he doesn't care. And then once he drops down, he's going to bring his units on the board, and I can't shoot what I want to shoot. It's so powerful just to understand that. And you can even just sacrifice your Soul Scry, just be like, I'll put my Soul Scry here. I know he's going to die, but he's going to take, again, those 30 Sisters shots. He's guaranteed to die, but he's done his job. And I think that's one thing I've learned is, no model is so sacred to keep except maybe Volturnus. But even then, you can still sacrifice him because you're still fighting first on turn 3.
Yeah. Even my Shadow Warriors, if we played my Shadow Warriors, then are forced to attack what's closest, not what's juiciest. Yeah. And I'm bringing this point home because when we would have recorded faction-focused Deepkin, the shooting wasn't that popular. It wasn't that strong. Now it's becoming more strong. So that rule, I think, is more important than ever before. So,
exactly. And I think the one thing is that when you look at that rule is to understand that it's not just your army that gets that rule. It's, well, your army gets it, but again, it's like those Aether Wings, it's the IDK are not the closest, and those Aether Wings are closer. You must shoot at the allies. And so all those little bits and pieces that, eventually add up to be like, oh, so I can bring 50 points and screen my entire army. Fantastic.
Yeah. And 50 points are cheap.
Yeah.
Any final comments you want to talk about with Idoneth Deepkin before we wrap this up, Hayden?
I think we covered a lot. I think, if you're going to pick up IDK, I think you're well endowed to invest in any of the models. You'll always do really well. Whether or not you'll be at the top table does not matter if that's not what you're interested, but you will always do well because of how the book is written, because of how the allegiance play out and how the models, work. So Allopexes, even Thralls can do their job. There's been, before Eels were a big thing, Thralls were around. So they'll always be maybe competitive, just not top dogs. So
Very
you can
cool.
literally, you can buy anything, which is great. I think there's so much flexibility in the army.
So I'll bring it home by saying, add more Leviathans. I want more turtles on the table. Bonus points if you put bandanas on them. Bonus points if you put bandanas on them and you call them Ninja Turtles.
There is some guy at CanCon. I don't know if you saw him. He did bring the Ninja Turtles. He painted them all up. He had all the shells, the red.
Oh, he's one of my boys. He's from my crew. He's from the Lords of Ruin. Yeah, it's my crew. Yeah. It's all good. Yeah,
I was just saying, he brought the Ninja Turtles. That was amazing. There you go.
He didn't have 4. I didn't think he had 4. I think he had like 2 or 3 at most.
No, there was one with 4. I'll guarantee it. You can. I'll look it up for you.
Maybe it wasn't one of my crew. But speaking of crew, you are a part of the Model Citizens. Model Citizens.
That's right.
You are a model citizen. Do you want to bring us home any shout outs, any call outs? If people want to find you, where can they find you, Hayden?
So big shout out to all the Model Citizen boys. So big shout out to Will, who organised it all. So if you ever want to find us or join us, we've got a Facebook group. Just look up Model Citizens on Facebook. We also, right now we're not, but we do catch up at House of War in Ringwood. So that's out east of Victoria in Melbourne. Big shout out to Mr. Smorgan himself and the Runax boys. So that's Arthur Volgaris and Smorgan. Otherwise, I think, yeah. Oh, lucky last is the Greensboroughs. There's a little group up north. If you're in the northern suburbs, check out the Greensborough boys. It's like Greensborough Good Games. So there's little groups all over the place. Just look out for them.
Awesome. Yeah. And pretty sure like 45% of my audience is in America, so I'm sure they'll be definitely at House of War when we reopen. No, look, it's been great. I think I love the Melbourne guys. I think there's definitely opportunity in the Melbourne crew. There's a good bunch of people, but I would love to see that scene grow. I know you guys are doing some great work there. But Hayden, this was an absolute pleasure. I know we could talk a lot more about Idoneth Deepkin, but I think everyone who enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, comment, do the YouTube stuff that I should be telling you to do. Hopefully you are already liking, subscribing, commenting. Let me know what your thoughts are. If you think you are using Leviathans or Allopexes, or you're bringing in some interesting allies, we would always love to hear what you're doing. And even maybe look at some of the ways you can build around some of the new meta, whether it's going to be Zanj, Seraphon, who knows what our Lumineth's going to bring to the table. But I think you're in a good spot, because I certainly have been thinking about how do I build an army outside of Magic Reliance, and do I give up Magic altogether? And I think Deepkin is showing the way that you don't need Magic with a good game plan.
And if you've got like some kind of IDK hidden filth, hit me up. I'm all ears. Love to hear it.
No, the bloke came 14th. He doesn't need any more secret filth. He's got enough.
Just a little bit more. No, thanks for the episode today, Coach. Hopefully the real Hayden out there, the Hayden Ford RDK, Sam and Will from Model Citizens wants to get in touch. Apparently I'm an imposter, so that's a shout out to the other Hayden.
Shout out to other Hayden. So in Australia, there is 2 Hayden Fords who play Deepkin. So shout out to both of you Hayden Fords playing the mirror matches. You guys are killing it in the scene. Thank you very much. Cool. All right, well, Model Citizens, let's roll. Make sure to focus on the objectives and shoot the heroes. It's always the best advice I can give you at this point in time. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the show. Like, comment, subscribe. Hayden, you're a godsend. Great discussion.
Thank you very much. Catches.
See you guys.